Welcome, everybody, to the F4 Hunger Awareness Show.
It's my goal to feed 1 billion people before I die.
We want to bring awareness around the issue of hunger and food insecurity.
7 to 8 million people served so far, with the sole goal of eradicating world hunger by connecting sources of food to recipients in need. Fiorenza's Food for Friends.
Hi, I'm Derek Fiorenza with the F4 Hunger Awareness Show, joined by
Isabella Ambrosino.
And today we have one of my really good friends, brilliant man, Joe Giandonato. He's on the show with us today, and he's going to be tackling an important issue, something that often gets overlooked. But blue light, what is blue light? How is it affecting our sleep patterns, and how is it affecting our overall performance? Joe, if you want to share a little bit about your background, I know you're finishing up your PhD program, and then we look forward to hearing about the blue light and the effect on our sleep quality.
Thank you, Derek, and thank you, Isabella. My name is Joe Giandonato. Presently serve as an employee well-being coordinator at the University of Virginia. In addition to that, too, I also serve as an adjunct faculty member at numerous 2- and 4-year colleges, within the Northeast. And I am embarking on completing my dissertation research. I'm set to defend in the coming weeks, where I explored a correlation between physical activity and academic performance among non-traditionally aged students or students over the age of 25. Prior to my time at the University of Virginia, and also prior to my time serving as an adjunct professor, I served as a strength and conditioning coach, also serving as a facility manager working in recreation leadership. In addition to that, too, I served as a clinical exercise physiologist, also personal trainer, and I've had the great fortune of writing many different articles for numerous publications, online and print, mainstream media, fitness media. Also have about 24 articles that have gone through the peer review process. So junior comparison to many of my colleagues, but for me, writing, and for me, educating others is really a passion of mine, and that's really what gets me up in the morning, so to speak, and fulfills me. So it's an absolute honor to be here today to educate you guys, as well as your followers, and also individuals that are associated with the great work that you do, Derek, and that you're a part of, Isabella, on how to improve your sleep. And we're going to be discussing one of the impediments in achieving better or optimal sleep, and that is blue light. So we're going to find out, is blue light blocking your path to better quality sleep? So today we're going to be discussing what is sleep, also what is sleep quality, and how is it differentiating from sleep duration. Sleep duration, has been long championed and advocated. Hey, we have to get our 7 to 9 hours of sleep. That's fine and well, but sleep quality is one of the missing components of total and quality sleep. Also, we look at, what is blue light? Well, blue light is what is emitted by this phone, or by the laptop in front of me, or the full screen or the other laptop that's adjacent to me. We're also going to be analyzing critically a research review by Swarties and Muro and colleagues back in 2023, which examined the impact of sleep quality and its associated with academic performance. And then also discussing practical solutions for improving sleep quality prior to our conclusion in the next 25 to 30 minutes or so. And then, of course, we'll open it up to some discussion among the three of us. So what is sleep? Well, sleep is a reversible state in which a person is perceptually and physically disengaged from and unresponsive to the surrounding environment. It is governed by the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or SCN, a structure which is housed in the hypothalamus. Sleep is largely influenced by Y-aminobutyric acid, or GABA or GABA, which is secreted in the anterior hypothalamus, and adenosine, which is secreted in the anterior pituitary gland. Now, people consume caffeinated beverages, tea and coffee. There's just water in here, but there was coffee in here a little bit earlier, as well as caffeinated supplements or stimulants, because they block adenosine receptors. So caffeine, in a way, is an adenosine antagonist. And that's why a lot of folks will consume caffeine, because it is blocking adenosine. Now, wakefulness is going to be governed by acetylcholine, dopamine, norepinephrine, serotonin, and also histamine. Now, what does sleep do? It enhances neurocognitive functioning. So individuals that are sleep deprived, and sleep deprivation is something that's going to be very individual. Some folks need, 7 to 8, 9 hours of sleep at night. We're talking about adults. Obviously, toddlers, 12 to 16 hours, infants, 16 or more hours. The cat that you see here, British short hair kitten, anywhere from about 21 to about 23 hours per day. Cats are lazy and slovenly, but they are, micro-sized killers, so they're ready to pounce at any given moment, as are mine, but they don't really attack bugs, just each other, but I digress. So sleep is going to range in terms of requirements from person to person, especially adults. We have some adults that are short sleepers, so they have present what is known as the DEC2 gene. There's a pop quiz later on. Make sure you remember that. So we look at individuals like designer Tom Ford. We look at, former President Barack Obama, 45th and 47th President Donald Trump can operate on 3 to 4 hours of sleep per night. That's likely the case with Elon Musk also. We're not politicizing anything, but we're just going off of anecdotal as well as news reports that these are individuals that are very successful that would sleep very little. Kobe Bryant was one of them too, that slept anywhere from 3 to 4 hours per night. We could look at interviews from Tim Grover and Dwayne Wade and members of the 2008, 2012 basketball teams. You're able to get by on that amount of sleep. But for most of us, for most lay folk, 6, 7, 8 hours of sleep, 9 hours of sleep. Athletes are recommended to shoot for, 8.25 hours of sleep per night. But we could be sleep deprived if we miss out on an hour of sleep, or maybe even 2 hours of sleep. And we may be sleeping, 6 or 7 hours a night, which is sufficient for some people. So sleep deprivation is something that is highly individual. Now, if we are sleep deprived, we're going to be reducing or impacting our neurocognitive functioning. So, just the synaptic activity within the neocortex, within the brain, is going to be delayed. Reaction time is going to be delayed. There's also higher risk of suicidal ideation among individuals that are acutely and also chronically sleep deprived. There's evidence that shows this. In addition to that, too, your power output is going to be reduced. Okay, your body's ability to summate force. Force is mass times acceleration. So how quickly can you move a heavy barbell? Or how quickly can you move, a heavy lineman who's right across from you? I'm sorry, I couldn't resist because, draft night is tonight, Thursday, April 24th. And I'm excited to see who the Eagles pick. Hopefully it's a defensive tackle to supplant the outgoing Milton Williams, but I digress. We also look at sleep deprivation impacting, psychoaffective state. So typically individuals are going to have exacerbated trait anxiety, greater state anxiety, because they're sleep deprived. And then it's like, hey, hold on a second. Well, I'm going to grab more coffee because I feel tired. And coffee is a central nervous system stimulant. It's blocking adenosine. Adenosine is really one of the chemicals that serves as a signal for tiredness and, signaling to the body, hey, you might need some rest or might need some sleep. So we perpetuate sleep deprivation societally. Okay. So if you need 8 hours of sleep, there might be some nights you get 5 or 6. And we'll show you why. And we'll show you why sleep quality is so important to close the gap on sleep deprivation. Now, sleep streamlines metabolic processes and influences the secretion of hormones which modulate appetite and satiation. Sleep also bolsters immunologic functioning. So individuals who are sleep deprived are going to be at a greater risk or greater proclivity to contract transmissible colds and flus and viruses and whatnot, which are quite prevalent, during the winter months when we're indoors and in close proximity to one another. That's why, a lot of these physicians and experts and different governing bodies will recommend getting sufficient sleep, in addition with seasonal immunizations, as well as eating healthy and also making sure that you're amply hydrated. Sleep also provides an environment that is conducive to the production and dispersal of peptide and sex hormones, which enable the reparation of tissue to occur following exercise and healing in response to an injury. So vitally important when we look at a perspective of adding lean body mass, when we look at the perspective of improving fertility, because again, these sex hormones, testosterone and estrogen, and peptide hormones, we look at different growth factors, growth factor, human growth hormone, insulin growth factor, as well as insulin, are all going to be secreted, in streamlined amounts during optimal periods of sleep, particularly your deeper or your slower wave sleep periods, REM being one of those. And we'll talk about REM shortly. So what is sleep quality? Well, sleep quality is constituted of facets such as sleep continuity and sleep efficiency. So sleep continuity means not having disruption. Sleep efficiency is being able to get to slow wave sleep or REM sleep more quickly. Sleep quality differs from sleep duration. We mentioned before, 7 to 9 hours is the gold standard for adults, as it is largely a subjective measure drawn from an individual's self-satisfaction with all aspects of the sleep experience. Alternatively, it can be objectively measured by a sleep study, which involves polysomnography, where we are analyzing different stages of sleep, particularly rapid eye movement or REM sleep. Sleep quality is linked to acute or often next day cognitive physical performance, and over time can increase the risk of mental health conditions and development of cardiometabolic disease. Now, what is blue light? Blue light is just what was emitted from my phone, okay? And that is a form of artificial light that encompasses LEDs, and in contrast to natural light, which is around us, natural ambient light, possesses vastly different spectral distribution characterized by shorter wavelengths. So anywhere from 500 or 400 to 500 nanometers. Natural light has up to about 700 nanometers, sometimes a little more. So these are going to be shorter wavelengths. They're typically going to be, stronger. And if we are viewing blue light, oh boy, here we are again, in really short bursts, it can potentially cause, corneal and retinal inflammation. In addition to that, too, blue light exposure prior to bedtime has been shown to impart effects on photoreceptors, such as cones, rods, and intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells. And these intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, that is a tongue twister right there, or iPRGCs, project upon the pineal gland and inhibits the secretion of melatonin, which is a hormone that is innately involved in the body's sleep-wake cycle. That's why people that say, hey, I'm going to go watch TV before I go to bed, I can't fall asleep, so I want to watch more TV, they perpetuate this vicious cycle because blue light contributes to delayed sleep or sleep latency or insomnia, because it is playing on these photoreceptors, particularly the iPRGCs, and they are impeding the pineal gland secretion of melatonin. Now, research review, okay? I'm definitely a big fan of, research. There needs to be empirical evidence to back virtually everything that I do in life. Any decision that I make, decision science is rooted in research and rooted in empirical data, and is really going to govern best practices in medicine or allied health fields, best practices in business, best practices in industrial science. So very critical. So we need to make sure that we're critically examining the research. So first and foremost, exposure to blue light emitting screens such as those of smartphones, tablets, laptops, and TVs prior to bedtime has been shown to reduce sleep quality and contribute to insomnia. And there's a number of studies that suggest that. Additionally, blue light exposure before bedtime has been shown to contribute to tempered wakefulness and reduce quality of life measures. among all members of the population. This is of particularly interest among college-age students, youth, and also high school students, as well as young adults whose use of smartphones is going to be higher among other age groups or highest among other age groups. Now we'll critically examine the study performed by Swardees, Muro, and colleagues in 2023. So Swardees and Muro, or Swardees, Muro, and colleagues hypothesized that sleep quality is positively related to academic performance, and being a good sleeper, according to the Pittsburgh Sleep Quality Index, which is a validated instrument to assess sleep quality. It featured a multimodal design. So we looked at obtaining descriptive statistics, which include standard deviations as well as means or averages. Also, it was cross-sectional, and it was a correlational study because it did incorporate a Pearson product moment correlation, or Pearson's R. So there were 640 subjects in the study, emanating from 5 academic departments at an R1 university, which is recognized for having the most research activity, and that's on a scale of R1 through R4. So there's a lot of research activity here. This actually is a prestigious public institution where this was transpiring, and there was also random sampling. The survey entailed Pittsburgh sleep quality index items, as well as socio-demographic questions. There were clearly demarcated inclusion-exclusion criteria to homogenize the sample, and the data related to sleep quality was categorized as poor, normal, or good. Statistical analyses constituted frequencies and percentages to describe categorical variables, as well as Pearson's R and adjusted standardized residuals for comparisons. The quantitative variables were explicated by means and standard deviations, with comparisons among groups employing t-tests, and also analysis of variance and Bonferroni corrections, which are deployed to establish false positives among comparison of the same data set. So essentially, it's going to be correcting that data to make sure there are no type 1 errors. So statistical significance was set at an alpha level of 5%. Now, the findings of this study revealed statistically significant differences among the 3 academic performance groups and higher overall scores on the Pittsburgh Sleep Quality Index, indicating worse sleep quality was correlated with worse academic performance. Sleep quality components were established as key determinants of academic performance, as high mean frequencies were noted among subjective sleep quality and sleep efficiency across all groups. So the implications of the study are that poor sleep equals poor academic performance, and we can deduce from that, that poor cognitive performance resulted from having poor sleep or poor sleep quality. Now, that has great transference to those, in the working world, those in a corporatized environment, those that, are engaging in neurocognitive tasks, or maybe task switching, or maybe relaying information or recalling information. Certainly sleep quality, can affect, neurocognitive processes, such as, spatial, and also, episodic memory and being able to contextualize and put things together. So it's vitally important that we are, attaining and also maintaining, a high degree of sleep quality. So we have practical solutions for improving sleep quality. We'll discuss these prior to concluding, and then, sharing kind of a breakout discussion, sharing some questions in the waning minutes of this brief presentation. So there are multiple applications to dim or soften the hue. And again, we could maybe go from a more bluish synthetic hue, which is emitted from a smartphone, to one that might be a little bit more rosier, that's a little bit softer on the eyes, that doesn't cause, photoreceptor, reactivity, and particularly, projections of those IPRGCs onto the pineal gland, thus in turn, improving or even reducing sleep latency because now your pineal gland can secrete melatonin. That's why you typically sleep better or fall asleep quicker in hotel rooms because you have all those shades that you could cast across the windows. Tinting your screen is another option. You see this in a lot of medical legal environments, or even banking environments where they'll tint the screen so it's not viewable to anyone that could walk by or passerbys. But if you tint the screen head on, that's going to reduce the amount of blue light, um, you know, or the waves, or blue light wavelengths that are now interacting with the eye physiology. We also can change to a black background from the white background. So we have to consider that, especially if we have an iPhone, black background, better contrast, probably better to do that at night. We could also establish those changes within the settings for free. We could also cease blue light exposure 30 to 60 minutes before bedtime. So it's really at this point where we can maybe, not maybe eco-friendly, but we can print, some documents, or we can read a book, or we can go off a Kindle that doesn't have backlighting. Um, these are some better options versus reading off of a phone or reading off of a laptop or conventional tablet, iPad, etc. And then also harmonizing the sleep microclimate. So being considerate of the bedding, the clothing that we're wearing, and also ambient temperature and humidity. Now, typically, cooler temperatures closer to 60 degrees, with roughly, 50 to 60% humidity is ideal, might be really hard to achieve and maintain throughout the course of the year. This has been shown to increase, more brown adipose tissue activity, also stimulating, more uncoupling protein activity, where we're essentially burning a little more fat in our sleep. But it also helps us get to deeper sleep more quickly, as some studies have shown. Not necessary, because we want to make sure that we're able to eliminate some of the technological stimuli on the front end before we address some of these things on the back end. But these are really nice ancillary things to have. And also avoid consuming large meals prior to bedtime, particularly faster digesting foods that are rich in carbohydrates or fiber. Also refrain from consuming large quantities of fluid prior to bedtime, whether it's through voluminous amounts of fruits or vegetables, or consuming like a large beverage prior to bedtime, because that will cause some GI disruptions. It will also perhaps cause you to get up in the middle of the night to maybe go to the bathroom to relieve yourself, and that right there is a disruption, and that right there is going to interrupt your sleep and therefore affect your sleep quality. And this hasn't been examined extensively in the literature, but we look at sleep disorders, and sleep disorders afflict 1 out of every 3 Americans. So roughly, 50 to 70 million Americans have a sleep disorder. I'm wondering how many, are not achieving good sleep quality, and there isn't some underlying, medical condition. And I would probably speculate there's tens of millions of people that, are impacting their sleep quality because they're overutilizing technology, particularly too close, to bedtime or retiring for the evening. So to conclude, sleep quality is a critically important aspect of health and, based on the literature, predictive of both acute performance and health outcomes. Therefore, it is imperative that the role of sleep quality is not overlooked by the medical community and instead prioritized by practitioners, educators, and organizations to ensure the health and population they serve.
Amazing, Joe. I have like 12 questions. Can I do rapid fire?
Rapid fire, try your best.
All right.
I'll try my best.
All right. So here we go. This is all about sleep quality.
Mhm.
Cold showers. Does it help or no difference?
I think that warm showers would probably be a little bit more beneficial because they can cause some relaxation. They've also been shown to um, promote parasympathetic domain or relaxation, which is analogous with deep breathing and also stretching. prior to bedtime.
Okay. The toothpaste to use and the toothbrush.
I haven't seen anything in the literature, but admittedly, I haven't looked for anything to establish any correlations between electric toothbrushes, your typical bare bones toothbrushes that the dentist disperses or dispenses, and any toothpaste.
I've been seeing people talk about bamboo toothbrushes. Have you seen that?
I've seen that, but I haven't really dived into the literature all that much on that topic.
All right. Types of sheets and clothes. Is cotton preferable over a different kind?
It's all about preference. Cotton really is not that breathable. And then also we have to consider the thread count. So higher thread counts, typically are going to be a little more breathable. They're going to be a little more soft and smooth and supple, but they are going to be a little more expensive.
Got it.
And again, that's also going to provide, closer body ventilation, which is contributing to the sleep microclimate.
The laundry detergent that we're using on our sheets.
I really haven't done much research in that area. However, if you want to use fabric softeners, that's really going to just be a personal preference at that point. So find what works for you. But I would say let's attack this issue on the front end, and on the front end, it's really going to be technologically rooted.
Got it.
And then we can focus on establishing some preferences on the back end, where now we tweak our sleep microclimate.
So speaking of technology, I've been hearing about something called Wi-Fi emitting. Should you turn your Wi-Fi router off at night?
I haven't seen any evidence that supports shutting off your Wi-Fi router. Unfortunately, we have a lot of devices beyond
Yep.
our computers, beyond our phones, that operate off Wi-Fi. But what I would do, and again, this is more so personal preference, and I have seen some literature on this, many of it being suggestive, is to eliminate the number of electronics that are in your bedroom or in close proximity to you while you sleep.
Turning them off or just getting them out of there?
Just getting them out of there, or going to a room that's almost electronic free.
Got it. Glasses. I have these blue light glasses. Do they help?
Yep, it's going to be a filtration system, and it's going to distort the blue light wavelengths.
Got it. I've seen some stuff recently. Some friends have used red lights, so at nighttime they put red lights on. Is that a thing? Does it
Red
help?
light's going to promote relaxation. It's been accepted as a therapeutic modality. To promote relaxation recovery. As it stimulates, a little bit more parasympathetic domain. If it's an option, then I would definitely vie for it. But I think again we focus on the front end of the issue, and again that's really kind of the overabundance and proliferation of technology, particularly handheld technology.
You spoke about before bedtime how much you're eating and how much you're drinking because you don't want to be getting up during the night. Does getting up really create a problem aside from just we woke up? Does it hurt our overall quality of sleep that night?
For people that are light sleepers and people that can't get into deep sleep as readily, most certainly that could affect their sleep quality. It could also affect their sleep continuity because they're getting up, and their sleep efficiency. So we want to reduce the amount of times that we're getting up at night. So for individuals that find themselves getting up to relieve themselves, and we see this with people with benign prostatic hyperplasia or large prostates. It's imposing some pressure now on the bladder, so they always have to, or have the urge to go. So for those individuals, maybe ceasing some fluid consumption an hour, maybe 2 hours prior to bedtime. And again, they need to match that with their lifestyle and what they're doing late at night, if they're working, if they're exercising. So it's really, you really have to strike a fine balance.
In terms of food consumption, foods with less ingredients versus more. Like I'm trying to wean myself more and more off of cereal, but that's been something I've struggled with over the years. Like if you
Yeah.
had steak and eggs and then,
Well,
vegetables during the day, does that contribute better than if I had cereal during the day? My sleep quality would be worse at night.
protein is going to be more slow digesting than refined grains, and you find them in cereals. You get a lot of the cereals are of refined grains. They do have fortified micronutrients, vitamins, and minerals in them, which are added during either the um, the biofortification process, or when they're farming, or during the manufacturing process. So, I mean, my recommendation: slower digesting foods. Protein digest a little more slowly, casein more slowly than whey if we're going to consume anything prior to bed, because research has shown that consuming 40 grams of protein, and I can't really cite the study off the top of my head, is superior than 20 grams of protein to enhance muscle protein synthesis. If we're consuming 40 grams of whey, that's going to have a different digestive effect or digestive pattern than 40 grams of casein protein. So maybe go with a blend, maybe go with casein exclusively, because that digests a little bit more slowly. So, anything that doesn't contain a lot of fiber, anything that doesn't contain a lot of sugar or starch, should be fine.
All right, and then my last three, then I'll turn it over to Isabella. Is sleep damage a real thing? Is it reversible?
I've never heard of the term, sleep damage, but I've heard of, there being a sleep deficit, and sleep debt. So you can address having, a sleep deficit, but you can address having a sleep deficit. Just say if you've been experiencing sleep deprivation for a week and you're like, hey, well, I missed out on 3 hours of sleep the night before. I usually sleep 8, now I slept 5, and then 6 hours, and 2, and it's accumulative, that deficit. It's not like you're gonna be able to sleep that off on a weekend. Okay.
Got it.
The only reason we were able to do that in our 20s and Isabella can get away with it now is because you're younger. All right. And you have more energy, there's more metabolic activity, you don't need as much sleep. But when you have more responsibilities, you have children, you have, a demanding full-time job, you're immersed in, academic research, whatever the case may be, it's harder to pay off that sleep deficit with all those competing demands.
You mentioned the DEC gene, and you said like Kobe Bryant, Donald Trump, Elon Musk, they have this ability to kind of not sleep very often, but they don't lose productivity or efficiency. Can we be tested for that gene to see if we have it?
I imagine, genetic testing will cover that. Epigenetic medicine is really the future of medicine. And we see, body scans, we see getting, full blood panels, which extend, the rote, labs that, our PCPs are, prescribing for us. So that's something that can be investigated, and certainly, I would definitely seek out, the assistance of, sleep specialist or a neurologist who specializes in, sleep studies, or perhaps even a geneticist.
And that would also tell us if we're in that category of needing more or less sleep to be effective.
Perhaps, yes, but you would likely know that because you've operated and operated on a high level with very little sleep, in comparison to that 7 to 9 hour guideline that's been set forth by the National Sleep Foundation, World Health Organization, CDC, and P, and a bunch of other organizations.
Got it. That was helpful. Isabella, you're up.
All right, you actually asked a lot of the questions that I had. But another question I had was, what's the best way to track your sleep? And like to know if you're having good quality sleep. I see some people use Apple Watches, Oura Rings. Are these good things to use? And does this actually help track sleep?
Buying a mega wave. No, I'm kidding. They're really expensive. I would be most interested to see the effects of sleep, and its relationship with heart rate variability. For one, I try to make things as efficient and as cost effective as possible. So what I do there is, I will, subjectively assess my sleep on a scale 1 to 5, 1 to 10. You could use a Likert scale, you could modify it, you use elements of the Pittsburgh Sleep Quality Index to evaluate your sleep. You could score it longitudinally over the course of a week. You could, compute a cumulative score. I think it's probably best to simplify it. Maybe assessing, your energy levels, throughout the day and how they correspond with the duration of sleep. And you can now examine all these variables, and you could manipulate them. So, hey, I didn't sleep that well last night, but I went to a movie late. Or I didn't sleep that well last night because I was running sprints, very late up the hill near my house. And that's happened to me before, where I would sprint. Sometimes I train late at night. 10, 11 at night, sprinting. I'm like, okay, I can't fall asleep until, 1 a.m. And then I'm up at like 5:36 and I'm really groggy. So, you need to understand why you didn't sleep. So again, evaluating everything, globally, so what was the day like, or what was the week like, or the month, or any stressors that are transpiring, during or around the time that you're sleeping.
Okay. And then another question I had is that so I'm the type of person that moves a lot during my sleep, like tosses and turns. Does that mean that I'm having bad quality sleep? Because I wake up feeling like awake and refreshed, but I move a lot. I'm tossing and turning. I don't know if that's like a sign that it's bad.
If you feel fine, have at it. You're an active dreamer. Maybe there's some sleep microclimate or sleep environment, or maybe some sleep hygiene, or ergonomics that you could maybe address, or account for. But as long as you feel well rested in the night,
Okay.
I would not be concerned. Now, if you're sleepwalking, then there would be a concern, and that's far outside of my scope, as someone who is, an exercise science, faculty member and researcher. So, there you probably need a little bit more of an intervention.
Okay. All right. And then that was it for questions. Derek
Sure.
already asked a couple of the other questions I was thinking about, but that's it on my end.
So, Joe, this has been awesome. I have a question for you. You mentioned epigenetic. What is that?
So epigenetic, medicine, and again, I really don't know that much about, the field, but what they're doing is they're looking at, your health risks based off of, your genetic profile. And these tests can be, performed by different, companies. Uh, you know, the cost is usually going to involve a comma,
Oh,
and
wow.
usually will not be covered by, an insurance company. But it's great to establish, maybe cancer risk, or maybe risk of developing cardiometabolic disease. So now you can forecast for that issue,
Yeah.
and now address that through your lifestyle.
Amazing.
And that's
Amazing.
really going to be the future of medicine.
You think it will be?
I believe so.
Yeah. Getting ahead of these things makes a lot of sense. We plan financial planning, right?
Hmm.
We try to plan for how much we're going to pay in taxes this year. We plan on how we're going to grow our business.
Yep.
We plan on how many kids we're going to have. Not always, but you have like certain goals you shoot for,
But,
but you don't plan for your health.
yeah. Well, one thing that we look at is, how flawed the construction of our health care and our health insurance infrastructure is, where they would rather just save money now, versus investing more in diagnostic and preventative services, which are going to reduce the burden to the individual,
Hmm.
reduce the financial burden to society, reduce financial burden to themselves by diminishing the amount of money that'll be appropriated to chronic and catastrophic, as well as palliative care at the end of life.
It's so much there content wise. That's a whole nother episode. I think what we'll do, Isabella, is we'll share the article that Joe wrote to accompany this, and then we'll follow it up with the podcast. This way, it's kind of you can listen to it auditorially, and then you can also read it, so you can kind of get both ends of it. And then, Joe, if people have questions, I guess they can contact you.
They can contact me directly. My screen is no longer shared, um, but you could share my email address, in that article, if you want to go ahead and maybe draft a brief biography for me when that article is posted.
That would be great. Yeah, this was truly informative, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the conversation. I enjoyed learning. You have so much knowledge, Joe.
Well, I would be blessed one day to have the opportunity to share the knowledge and my passion, for acquiring more knowledge, and that never ending or never satiated thirst. Um, so we'll see what the future holds, but again, pining for some faculty opportunities locally, and hopefully one comes to fruition, so I can continue to pay it forward.
That would be wonderful. Well, with that, I want to thank you for being with us, Joe. As always, your friendship and your information, it's impactful. And I'm looking forward to implementing some of these changes, Isabella. Just from what we kind of looked at today, I think
Me
some
too.
be so beneficial. But thank you, Joe, for joining us. This has been the F4 Hunger Awareness Show with Derek Fiorenza,
And Isabel Ambrosino.
and we are very grateful to have Joe with us today. We look forward to having you join us and follow us in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
everyone.